When I was young, as many children do, I was shown how to make rock candy. And the way I remember it was that you warm some water and you keep adding sugar as you warm the solution, and you get a supersaturated sugar solution. And then you pour that supersaturated solution into a container with a string in the vessel, and as the liquid cooled, it would crystal out around the string, forming rock candy. And then you pulled the string out and you had basically hardened sugar water. And I thought it was amazing, not because I loved the sugar water, but because of seeing the whole thing work. And I have that same fascination with meditation, in the sense that I see this self in full bloom, and I wonder, what was the string? What was the initial conditions in which that was formed? What did it form around? What was the initial response that it began to form? And Buddhism, in its entirety, starts explaining how the sense of I comes into being. And it's as fascinating as any wonder of science to watch oneself form and then recede, and reform and recede again and again. Oftentimes we're so unconscious of that formation that we don't even notice it being formed at all. We just think it's almost continuous with ourselves. But as we get quieter, and you can begin to actually sense yourself coming out almost from the shadows, and then folding back in quietude. And that sense of formation, the string on which that formation occurs, is the tendency of our conditioning to have placed a positive or negative or neutral association with the object that it sees. So that if it sees something and it has a history of that object being pleasant, then it has a feeling of pleasantness associated with that initial image. And when that initial image has that feeling tone of pleasantness, there's a leaning towards it. That leaning towards it is really an elaboration of how much you want it. It's the desire, and then the story around that desire, and how much you need that particular object. And within that formation, through feelings, through desire, and through the elaboration of our narrative, we, the sense of I, comes into being around that particular pleasant object. Now, you may or may not have the subtlety of practice to be able to see all of that occur, but what we can see, and where I would like to point our practice, no matter how experienced we are, is that every experience has a feeling tone associated with it. And though you might not see the formation of self around that feeling, you can get a sense of the feeling itself. Feeling being pleasant, unpleasant, or basically uninteresting. And just so you take something like the breath, and the breath can start off as basically uninteresting. And that's why it doesn't hold much of our intention, because it's not as interesting as the thoughts that come up. So the thoughts get the leaning. They're more pleasant. They get what we lean towards the thought, and we're not interested in the breath. And so then we elaborate on the thought and stay in the thought. Now, as the breath gets more subtle, it also gets more delightful. It gets more welcoming. It gets paired with a kind of calm and tranquility. And now, from that tranquil place, there is a sense of it being pleasant in a way that it was neutral at one point. Now we start leaning into the breath. And we don't want any other object. Don't show me my pain or my itch. Just give me the breath, because I can settle in and form a security or a sense of relaxation response and a sense of delight around my breath. And we just keep selecting out those strings that are in front of us that we particularly appreciate. If we don't appreciate something, we do just the opposite. We pull away from it. We push back. There is often a physical sensation associated with the leaning towards or the pulling back. You can feel it almost in the body. Well, not almost. You can feel it in the body as a kind of contraction if we are moving towards, or a repulsion if we are moving away. And it has a physical sensation, and you can start picking that up a little more as different objects, emotions, internal objects, emotions. Everything has a feeling tone, so even if it's an internal part of the process of mind, like an emotion or a thought or physical sensation, still you'll find yourself leaning forward or leaning away or just being uninterested in general towards it. And so just getting a sense this afternoon of that initial tendency we have to form around something that's pleasant or unpleasant. Sometimes you'll notice it way down the line, long after you've elaborated on it, long after the reaction has occurred or in the midst of the reaction. Don't even know how you got in there. Believe me, you got in there through a simple feeling tone. And to start really giving that some credibility and some actual engaged attention so that we can begin to pick that up helps deepen our understanding of the formation of I.